Okay, awesome. So about me, it's quite a long story, but I've worked on speech and voice for 20 plus years. I've built consumer electronic experiences, experiences on physical devices, Jawbone, autonomous vehicles. Most recently, I moved to Switzerland, and I'm currently helping companies kind of push boundaries in speech recognition, conversational interfaces, and mixed reality. So today I want to talk about some of the building blocks I see to create some of these voice-first experiences, and how to build these experiences from the ground up. And then we'll take a little look at some trends of where this is all going. So a little history to ground us, because I've been doing this for so long. You know, for many years, we built experiences with directed dialogues and these static predefined grammars. So finally, recently, we're able to move to natural language grammars. So moving away from the dialogues that had to be pre-programmed, you know, each word, each step thought of ahead of time. And we're now able to move towards more user-driven dialogue. There's a whole other talk I could give on, you know, the definition of conversational, what it means to be conversational. And I would say that we're not there yet, but these natural language models and understanding lets users really interact a little bit more in the way they want, and lets them say the things that they want in a way that is comfortable for them. So another big step forward has been the ability to build experiences from the ground up, you know, with hardware and software designed together, which is why now we're seeing, you know, the Alexas and Google Homes, because finally we can build these devices. You know, when I started, it was just IVR, interactive voice responses over the phone, right? When you call your bank and your airline, it was speech automated, because there was like some big ass computer somewhere handling the processing of that speech. So finally, the processing power can live in these devices to allow for things like wake word, to be able to wake up your device, and then all of this cloud-based recognition. And the third area I call kind of part of the OS, and that's being able to design speech experiences to go deep. So they aren't just this layer on top, which is kind of where we started. And I'll show you some examples. Right, when Siri launched in 2011, it was huge. It was huge for the industry, because we could finally see how, you know, hardware and software could really start coming together. But even then, these are some old examples. You know, Siri could recognize the words I was saying, but couldn't understand what I was trying to say. And even as recently as maybe two years ago, I would say, you know, is there a new Radiolab podcast? And it would still just do a web search. Now today, we're seeing advancements, because if I ask for, you know, please play the next Radiolab podcast, it knows to open podcasts, knows which podcast I want, and starts playing it. So huge advancements. You know, finally, we're able to kind of string together these requests that are human-like, that are conversational, that gets past this top layer of just giving me these one-off responses, to really digging in, I would say deep linking into these apps, into the content, to give me the answers that I want. So huge progress forward. So if I had to say, like, what are some of those building blocks for these new experiences? The first, I would say, is, you know, let's look at just the input and output. And, you know, I know that many of you are already familiar with Alexa and how that works, but today you use voice as input. You know, Alexa, is it going to rain today? And you get an audio response back. You know, rain is likely in San Francisco. There's an 85% chance. Voice in, audio out. But we shouldn't forget the importance of the LED ring on top of Alexa, which is output, which is really key here, to show Alexa has heard me, it's listening, it's processing. It's a vital piece of the output of the scenario. And then we move to a world that has screens. So with Alexa Show, we're now able to use input such as, Alexa, show me kids shows to watch. And the show says, here are kids shows, and then gives us the choices on the screen. So using voice as input and the screen and audio as output. And then as a follow-up, the user can say, Alexa, play number 3. They can also go ahead and touch and scroll with to be able to select. So combining now voice and touch as inputs and audio and screen as outputs. And then there's these distributed or complementary experiences. You say, okay, Google, show me photos of Margaret on my TV. And it's what I call kind of this user-directed output to a screen. So the screens are separate from the devices itself, but create one seamless experience with input with voice and then output on the screens. Another example, okay, Google, what movies are playing near me? And then you might hear a list and, okay, Google, send that to my phone. So along comes Magic Leap and HoloLens, and now they're going to start putting sensors on your face and in your home. And we're now able to use those sensors to combine these inputs. I liken it a bit to how kind of voice started as being able to access the top layer, and now we can deep link to access content. Voice started as this single input, but now it will be combined with other inputs like gesture and eye gaze for content and for context. And I'm sure many of you have seen the famous MIT Media Lab put that there video from 1979. But this is really going to happen. This is starting to happen where with these sensors and with your voice, you're going to be able to say, oh, show me more about that. Or, what does he see over there? And be able to actually get responses that make sense. So very natural to combine all of these inputs. And some people are going to say, well, I'm not going to wear cameras cameras and sensors like that on my face. But the cameras are coming, folks. I mean, I look at things like Echo Look, and I think, it's not going to be long before the other Echoes have cameras too. And so if we look at like the input as a building block of the future, so now we're talking about what types of input we can combine together. So there's voice and touch, text, gestures, eye gaze. The brain is not so far off. There's also all this contextual input that we're going to want to use. That we're the position of the body, cameras, emotions, speed, heart rate. Who the speaker is, and already we're seeing some of this, being able to identify speakers. So on the output side, just in those few examples, we saw, it's an art and science to find the right balance between audio and visual. So even with just audio and visuals, combining those outputs in an experience that makes sense can be tricky at times. But then we're going to start looking at other outputs. Haptics, lights and LEDs, actions, embodiments, and gestures as outputs. And so things are going to get more interesting. Like I said, another kind of building block I see is multi-user. And so, this may or may not be something you consider for the experiences you want to build, but in some cases, it's really important to know who's speaking. Google and Amazon have the ability to set up different profiles using voice authentication, so that when I say, play my workout playlist, it knows it's my workout playlist and not my husband's. So again, just a building block to think of how this can affect the experiences you want to build. So I listened to the VoiceBot podcast. I'm sure many of you do as well. And I love the episode with Tim McElreath of Food Network. You know, he said, voice does something that other UIs don't do. It's a conduit between channels and removes friction. And he talked about the use case while watching Food Network TV. You see a recipe that you want, and you want to be able to say, oh, save that recipe for later, or send that recipe to Alexa, so that the next day you might want to say, remind me what recipe did I save yesterday, or even go even further, what ingredients are in that recipe I saved, or even adding them to your shopping list. So I'm not exactly sure what to call this, but we're going to start to see this content hyperlinking, content tagging. In some ways it reminds me of what Amazon is doing with their X-ray feature, right? So you're watching a video and you're like, oh man, what were they in? And you pause it, and all of a sudden you can see into which actors are on screen, and then you can find out a little bit more about where what other shows they were in. I believe it's going to be very powerful to truly embed these kind of hyperlinks into our media and into our content. The other thing we're going to see, I don't know if this is a building block, but these are definitely new experiences that we're going to see, is these BBC calls interactive narratives. What we're starting to see is users becoming characters and not just answering questions, but truly becoming characters and affecting the story. They're conversing with characters in the story to help move the plot forward. So like I said, BBC has experimented with this, and I really do believe we're going to see more of this. So what is the future? Well, I believe that conversational interfaces are the future. Users don't like to download apps, and app fatigue has settled in. So we're moving towards an appless world where our conversational interfaces allow us to reach people in the channels they already massively use most of the time, instead of fighting a hopeless battle to drive them to niche standalone apps they infrequently visit. And if we're moving to an appless world, I do believe that voice is the key to an appless world. It's exactly what Tim McElreath said. Voice is the conduit. It's how you transition from one thing to the other without friction, without seams, kind of seamless. Voice lets you work broadly across the apps and across the experiences. And then our world is going to become our screen. And if anyone has actually tried like holding up their arms like this in gesture, you will know that this is not sustainable, that this is not natural to kind of interact with your world with your hands shoulder level for so long. And so this is where our eye gaze, head pose, gesture, and voice work together to interact with your world. These voice and other inputs are the controllers to the reality that people want. So we're seeing all of these, HoloLens and mixed reality seem to have little controllers in your hands, but the world will move forward where you won't need those goggles on your head, and B, you won't need those controllers in your hands in order to make this your reality. Assistance on the rise. Lots of talk about this in the past week or so. You know, in August 2017, Alexa and Cortana kind of got married. Kind of said we're gonna create this partnership, and that was kind of the first step, right? Assistants connected to other assistants. So I believe that we're moving to a world where there will be multiple assistants, and we'll kind of know which assistants are good at doing different things. So Alexa is good at certain things, but Cortana might be the one who organizes your calendar and writes your email. And so there was a demo that they showed just last week, I believe. I can use Alexa to open Cortana and then send emails that way. So it's assistants connected to other assistants. And then we're going to have assistants talking to other assistants. So why should I tell Alexa to open Cortana? Why can't I just tell Alexa to go tell Cortana what Cortana needs to do? And just take away some of those steps. And once we have assistants talking to other assistants, well, I mean, the assistants are acting on our behalf. And this, my friends, is, you know, Google Duplex in a nutshell. Assistants acting on our behalf, and you know, is it another assistant or a chatbot on the other end of that, or is it a hair salon? This is where it's going. And it's not new. You know, Chris Nessel in his book, Designing Agentive Technology, has been talking about this. This is robots acting on our behalf. We might set them up, but they're off and going to do the work for us. And we're going to see more of this. There's of course many questions about Google Duplex and things like this, but in a nutshell, right? Assistants acting on our behalf. One other area here that I'm starting to see a lot of is sentiment analysis and emotion. So whether that's recognizing in a chatbot in that kind of conversational interface, or with voice, recognizing the emotion of a caller, of a user, and then being able to, or even just visually with their face, and there's where those cameras come in again, being able to tailor your experience based on emotion and sentiment analysis to that particular user in that particular situation. So I guess kind of to sum up, you know, when I think about, you know, what's the point of all of this? You know, again, having worked kind of in mixed reality a little bit, one direction could be we're developing autonomous digital actors, right? So I can sit on a bench with an elephant and we can have a conversation. Maybe it's to make more friends, maybe partly, but with all of this, with the assistants on the rise, and with things like Google Duplex and all the technology that we're building, you know, I see the world of assistants and the future of voice is to help us become more human. Amber Case, if you don't know Amber, she says technology should amplify the best of technology and the best of humanity. And I wholeheartedly agree that we should be building voice-first experiences to augment the humans, to do the things that we don't have time for, that we don't want to do, to have agentive technology. They can go off and do it themselves. And let's just have more time to be more human. Let me stop sharing my screen. Hold on. There we go. How is that?
Any questions? Yeah, sure. Anyone? There's one down the back. Oh, sorry. you hear that, Karen? Hello?
Nope.
Okay, so we can repeat it for you.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
It's a little blurry, but I'll try.
Okay. So my question is more around the technology itself. Okay. There's a lot of companies working, big companies, mid-sized companies, small companies. The fate of some of those small companies rely on the development of this technology itself. If Google were to open its channels to duplex from an API perspective as open source, what do you think of the industry and the impact of that in terms of business for such small and medium enterprises?
I heard some of that. Tom.
I'll paraphrase for you. What happened if Google's technology they've used in duplex becomes more commonplace? What impact does that have on human businesses that rely on communicating with people like the hair salon if they are being inundated with robocalls?
Got it. On the one hand, I have to think, why is there someone answering the phone at the hair salon, right? Like they should be cutting hair and like tending to their customers. So if we think 10 years out or 5 or 10 years out, it's not someone answering the phone there. It's like 2 chatbots are figuring out when they can slot in a hair appointment. So that's so in some ways, like Google opens these APIs. Great, the hair salon will be able maybe easily to set up their own bot or conversational assistant so that they don't need that person. So I think that's like a little bit further out. I think I heard something in there about there's different companies doing this, big and small. Look, I think I've given other talks. There's a lot. If you're looking for a technology partner, there's a whole discussion to have about pros and cons of each technology partner that you might want to work with, and I think it will depend on what's important to you. Branding is a huge one. Do you need your own voice? The level of AI or flexibility of that platform. So I think that's a whole other discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. The first person I've ever heard that's been unapologetic about the duplex.
There are lots. There's lots to talk about. About duplex and the good and bad of it. But yeah, I don't know.
Can I ask a little follow-up to that? In this world where chatbots are speaking to chatbots, so we've got these kind of agents acting on our behalf, communicating with other agents. Are they still using natural language? I mean, that doesn't feel like the most efficient way to do that. But what do you kind of envision would happen instead?
I think then the design challenges is there's still a chatbot to human interaction because I need to tell my chatbot what I want it to do. So then the chatbot can go off and just figure it out. So I agree. It doesn't have to be natural language chatbot to chatbot, but it definitely needs to be able to report back to me in a way that I understand.
Hi, you probably answered this and I may have missed it, but one of the problems that I've encountered using chatbots and making chatbots is emotion via the way you actually say something. For example, I'm great, or I'm great. Do you know of an API or a way that's actually possible to do?
Yeah, I mean, I recently saw, Mark Paulina of Google talk about this, and it's much easier with words. I mean, you don't need a sentiment analysis to know, like, I'm great, whether it's all caps or lowercase. you could recognize those words and have a feeling of what that user is trying to say, right? Words, because you have them actually written, is very different than listening to your voice and hearing the anxiety or stress or anger, with voice. So with words, you actually have a lot you can already work with. You don't need those APIs. Now I will say I am seeing companies come online that can do that. I know of bigger companies who are building their own sentiment analysis as they're building their own natural language understanding. They are building some of this, but some of it is just text based. And I would just start with even what words are you seeing and what do you think that they mean in that context?
One more.
I have to paraphrase.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Text-based chatbots. Good examples where the chatbot either is good at augmenting the text base with voice, or vice versa, taking the voice and complementing the text which is going in. So basically, the voice is being integrated with the text, which either the customer sees, or vice versa. Hopefully that makes sense. Just good examples you've seen around there.
Look, I mean, I have to think that, I see voice and text are both two types of conversational interfaces. But when you start with a chatbot, and now you're saying, okay, well, sometimes I'm going to use text and sometimes I'm going to use voice. Like I see them as two separate channels. And when you have a chatbot that is purposely also saying, well, you can speak to me, we're just trying to cut down on typing. We're just trying to replace the keyboard. And in some ways, it's just dictation very often at that point. Like either you're a voice first experience, I guess you're a voice experience, or you're a chat bot, but you're using your voice to dictate because it's just too long to type. And I think that there's some there's more work to be done there. I don't know of any chat bots that have integrated voice in a way that really makes sense. Like I have chosen to use a chatbot for a particular reason because I'm in a certain context, in a certain use case, and I don't want to use my voice. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, you got a thumbs up. All right, great. Thank you so much, Karen. That was super interesting. A round of applause to Karen, please.
Thanks, guys.